Okay, guys, I just wanted to talk about a very important topic, which is de-dollarization. And this video has been like a very long time in the making. I've been convicted to make it because I think this topic is something that isn't common knowledge yet. So, yeah, I mean, you can look at the graphs for yourself. I'm not gonna like explain them and just go through them. You can kind of see the idea here. Um, the share of dollars that central banks and places like that are holding is going down. So it's for for quite a few factors. Um, you have the money printing, you have skyrocketing debt and the massive spending, deficit spending by the US government, and you also have the failures of the US government like Crimea. I mean, that was the turning point, really, because that's where this wave of de-dollarization has started since the US just allowed Russia to take Crimea in 2014. Then you have the withdrawal from Afghanistan, and the Russia-Ukraine war makes the US look really bad as well. Doesn't look like there's an end in sight there. And essentially, the reason I'm explaining all of this is to drive the point home that this is very similar to what was happening in the 1970s. And I'll go through everything and I will explain why that's significant. Okay. So, yeah, I mean, even here you can see this is the US deficit that they're running every year. Even since the 1970s, this is where the trend started. And I mean, as you can see, COVID just really accelerated the deficit spending. It's a bit better now, but it's clearly on a downward trajectory. And yeah, that's the national debt. Same thing here. Since 2020, it started spiking. 2008 had a spike as well, which is all the QE, the money printing. And in the 1970s is where, late 70s is where it's really started accelerating. So yeah, we're going to talk about the 1970s. It had two big waves of inflation. Um, 1973 to 75, 78 to 80. And we had a big wave of inflation in 2020 to 2022. So a second wave could be coming. And yeah, we also had, I mean, these three factors we're going to go over right now. So in 1971, the US abandoned the gold standard. So I'm going to make a video on the gold standard because it's very important. But essentially, the US guaranteed uh, an exchange rate for gold. So if a country wanted to get an ounce of gold, they would just have to pay, I think it was $35 an ounce. And that built a lot of confidence in the US dollar because essentially if you're holding dollars, if shit hit the fan, you could always change it into gold. You could rock up to the Federal Reserve, give them $35, and they'd give you an ounce of gold. That was the guarantee. But I mean, the US was printing money and the supply of dollars was going up. And the French came over and they started trading in a lot of dollars for gold. And the US was like, okay, we're running out of gold. We can't keep doing this. So they abandoned the system completely and made a new system. That's a topic for another video, but essentially now that the gold standard has been abandoned, the US is free to print money without consequence. And this was a big driver for the first inflation wave in 1970. You see the figures here, but essentially this caused two big inflation waves. And the US switched from the gold standard, from pegging the dollar to gold, into pegging the dollar to oil. They made a deal with, long story short, they made a deal with all the Middle Eastern countries. We'll provide you military protection, funding, but in exchange, you can only sell oil in dollars. Now, if you combine this, the big money printing, with the fact that oil, you can only buy oil with dollars mainly, means that, you know, more dollar printing, the price of oil just started skyrocketing and it started screwing over. By the late 70s, it just started screwing over like the EU, which was dependent on oil imports. And you combine this with massive spending by the government, irresponsible spending. Um, you had the massive costs of the Vietnam War, the big domestic projects which went nowhere. And you can compare this a lot with the COVID spending and a lot of the relief spending for the 2008 crisis. And this just started snowballing, snowballing, snowballing to where the US government just had to issue more and more debt, um, similar to what's happening now. So, yeah, and now we combine this with the geopolitical factor. Like today, the US is going through a lot of issues. In the 70s, obviously the US eventually won the Cold War, but in the 70s, it genuinely looked like the US was losing the Cold War. They had to leave Vietnam. Vietnam became communist, Cambodia became communist, and in 1979, there was a revolution in Iran. Iran before this was an ally of the US, so they only sold oil in dollars, but the Iranians started a oil embargo, which essentially just skyrocketed the oil price. And yeah, and this was really the 1979 was really the nail in the coffin. The Soviet Union invaded Afghanistan. It looked like they were reasserting their dominance in the Middle East. And the oil price, which was denominated in dollars, just started spiking. And it was the nail in the coffin. The EU was just like, we can't be using dollars anymore because the dollar just keeps weakening. It's screwing us over because it makes our currency stronger. We have to use our own currency. So they came out with the ECU, and this is what caused this. So you see, in the late 70s is when the dollar reserves just really started tanking. Like this is because of the EU just ditching the dollar. And yeah, so this was the first wave of de-dollarization. It recovered. But then yeah, the euro arrived and it's been on a steady downtrend since. And over here, we can see the waves of inflation. Uh, First wave in the mid 70s and the second wave over here in the late 70s. And it coincided with this. The share of the US dollars falling. Um, in the same way you have since 2020 over here. You have this first wave of inflation peaking at 7.5. Obviously, the real inflation is actually much higher, but this is CPI. The Fed can choose what goods they put in the basket, yada, yada, yada. But it still drives home the idea. So the parallels are clear, right? Also, just forgive me if I'm going through it quite quick. This is my first video. And if you have any questions, let me know. All the sources will be in the description for extra reading. But yeah, like as I said, the first wave of inflation already happened. And you can see the parallels, like massive deficit spending by the US government and failures, on the global stage. It looks like the US power is declining, same way as it did in the 1970s. And yeah, you have really, and so where we are right now is you have inflation according to the CPI at about 3%. But the thing is, the interest rates have been really high, and we've actually had QT, which is taking money out of the system. So the fact that inflation is really high, like it is now at 3%, means that now that the Fed is cutting interest rates again, means that inflation is most likely going to start skyrocketing again. Um, if you think about it, like there's a reason the Fed are kind of forced to cut interest rates here because the uh, unemployment is starting to tick up slowly again. Layoffs are starting to tick up. So the Fed is thinking, okay, we're going to save the labor market and we'll just have to deal with the inflation down the line. So, I think as the interest rates are starting to get cut, which the market is pricing in. I mean, already we've had an interest rate cut in October, in September, and in September 2024 as well, November 2024. So they are cutting interest rates, but with interest rates, it's usually an 18-month effect. So we're not going to see inflation until 2026, probably starting to tick up again. And as you can see, Middle East tensions, Ukraine, Russia war not in sight. So I think it's going to lead to a rotation into risk-off assets, such as gold. I mean, as we've discussed, US bonds, US dollars are not a risk-off asset for the reasons we've already discussed in the video. Um, so yeah, because US government deficits and the national debt isn't getting any better. In fact, it's getting much worse. So it's my thesis. So we're gonna go to the charts in a bit, but the US stock market has been on a 10 plus year bull run since the end of the 2008 crisis. It's been on an up only trajectory every year. And I think that's about to come to an end. Like in 2023, late 2023, gold has just started to go up and skyrocket. And let me just show you. Let me just demonstrate my point here. So let's just get rid of this. And let me show you the trend here. So yeah, you have gold being sideways here. And then 1971, the gold standard gets abandoned. And so the peg of gold to US dollars at $35 an ounce gets removed. So now it's just free to skyrocket. And you see this massive gold bull market coinciding with the big inflation waves in the 1970s. And what's funny as well is you have wave one over here, 1974, cool down, and then you have wave two over here, and it ends in 1980 with a blow off top for gold. I mean, from 76, even just from 79, when the EU started ditching dollars, you have a 3x in gold, more than a 3x in a year. So it goes to show that, this is a long process and things can still get parabolic here. And then 1980 to 2000, gold goes sideways. And then 2001 to 2012, bull market. 2012, 2023, 24, sideways consolidation for gold, and now bull market. Okay, now let's look at the S&P 500. S&P 500. Oh, interesting. Okay. 1971 to 1980, while gold is having its massive blow off top, the US stock market is going sideways. And it all starts to come together because during this time we had massive inflation in the US. We had geopolitical issues, and we had massive deficit spending by the US government, skyrocketing national debt. So this all starts to make sense why during this time gold goes up massively and the stock market just ranges sideways, doesn't do much for about 10 years. And now gold peaks in 1980. Let me just show you again here. 1980 January, gold peaks and starts to fall in 81. 1980, stock market really starts to rally and it goes on a bull run for about just under 20 years into 2001 dot-com bubble is where it peaks and it ranges sideways and it doesn't start to recover properly again until 2012. Gold, during this time, when the stock market can't recover, gold has a massive bull run and then it ranges sideways. And since gold has been ranging sideways, the stock market has a massive bull run here, which is still going on. But since gold has broken out last year, yeah, I think the stock market bull run is going to end very soon, either end of this year or next year, because of the reasons we have stated. It's like the 1970s. So you can kind of really start to see the pattern here. And obviously this is just a thesis here. But yeah, I mean, let me know what you think. Like, this is my first time trying a video, but I think this is really worth looking into. Really worth looking into. And yeah, I mean, just comment your thoughts if you're this far in, and yeah, thank you for watching.